7. UFOs over the ocean. In 2021, Pentagon footage of an unidentified flying object off the coast of San Diego was leaked to the public. Captured in 2019 aboard the Navy combat ship USS Omaha, the video shows a disc-shaped object hovering over the ocean and then plunging into it. Documentary filmmaker Jeremy Corbell posted the clip on Twitter, noting in a caption that no wreckage was ever recovered. And the Pentagon even confirmed that the footage was authentic. This is just one of many examples of footage captured by military personnel that appears to show strange objects in the sky. The years 2014 and 2015 were especially active for Navy pilots of the American East Coast, who reported seeing disc-shaped objects that appeared capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds and reaching altitudes of up to 30,000 feet. In an official report documenting 120 sightings over 2 decades, U.S. intelligence officials clarified that none of the incidents originated from the American military or government, including top-secret programs to develop new technology. Additionally, the findings conceded that experts don't have an explanation for many of the sightings, and the possibility of the objects being weather balloons, which has happened in the past, was largely ruled out. Simply put, while the reports didn't definitively conclude that any of the strange sightings involved extraterrestrial vehicles, the possibility also hasn't been disproven. Either way, the government's newfound openness about the issue is a good sign. Throughout 2023, the Pentagon has declassified a plethora of UFO-related videos and documents, making it easier than ever for people to come to their own conclusions. And the national dialogue about UFO sightings remains ongoing. 6. The Disappearance of Aor Mayorana. Born in Catania, Sicily in 1906, Aor Mayorana was a highly gifted theoretical physicist. He studied under the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi, who ranked Majorana among historic geniuses like Galileo and Isaac Newton. During the late 1930s, Majorana left his salary largely untouched. His checks were deposited into a bank account where the money accumulated until he abruptly withdrew it all on March 23, 1938. He then took a boat from Naples to Palermo for reasons that remain unclear to this day. Shortly before departing from Palermo 2 days later, Majorana sent an ominous telegraph to Antonio Carelli, one of his supervisors at the University of Naples where he lectured students. It contained an apology for Majorana's sudden disappearance and described his decision to vanish as unavoidable. Majorana quickly followed the cryptic note up with another telegram telling Carelli to disregard his previous message. Then, later that evening, he boarded a boat back to Naples. But he was never seen or heard from again, even after a police search was undertaken. And to this day, his fate remains a mystery. Several theories suggest that Majorana was running from something. Some believe that he predicted the development of nuclear weapons and wanted nothing to do with it, so he bailed. He could have been met with foul play, or maybe he took his own life. Or perhaps he started a new life as a new person. There's even been speculation that he believed he would have been forced to help with the development of a nuclear bomb, and that he fled to avoid participating in a not-yet-thought-of project that he was ethically opposed to. A cryptic note Majorana left behind for his family urged them not to grieve for more than 3 days, suggesting that he planned on dying. But nobody is certain what his confusing communications meant during those last few days he was seen alive. And the truth is that the mystery of his fate may forever remain unsolved. 5. The Freeden. In December 1988, an 82-foot freighter called the Freeden departed from Miami for Haiti with 7 Haitian crew members. Also on board was the German captain, Florian Meyer-Borsch, who also went by the name David Florian, and a 23-year-old journalism student named Lisa Bishop. When Lisa Bishop and several crew members failed to call their families on Christmas, their loved ones grew concerned about their well-being and contacted authorities. Lisa's boyfriend and loved ones had strongly urged her to pass on the trip, but it became clear in the weeks leading up to her departure that there was no talking her out of it. So, left with no other choice, they accepted her decision. A Coast Guard search failed to turn up any sign of the boat or its occupants, and they remain missing to this day, with the exception of one reported sighting that was never officially confirmed. Determined to find out what had happened to their daughter, the Bishops launched a campaign in pursuit of information that would help put the mystery of the Freeden's fate to rest. A woman in the Cayman Islands who was storing David Florian's belongings claimed that he was involved in large-scale human smuggling activities. She said that he'd gotten in over his head with the operation and that Lisa didn't know about it when she agreed to travel on board the ship. In 2017, a Redditor posted an update claiming that they spoke with Lisa's boyfriend. The post stated that Florian's parents and acquaintances hadn't seen or heard from him since the Freeden's disappearance, suggesting that the claims about him being alive were mere rumors. And while multiple people hinted toward his involvement in smuggling, no solid evidence was ever found to suggest that it might be true, even if it hasn't been totally disproven. To this day, everyone who is traveling aboard the Freeden remains unaccounted for, and while its fate remains a mystery, it can be reasonably assumed that something tragic happened at sea and caused the boat to sink. Do you personally know anyone who's disappeared on the high seas only to be found later? Let us know in the comments below. But first, subscribe. 4. The Sarah Joe. During the 1970s, a man from Maui named Robert Malayakini acquired a 17-foot motorboat and named it the Sarah Joe after his parents. One day in 1979, 5 seasoned fishermen set out from the easternmost part of the island's coast for a day of pleasure fishing. The crew included Robert's 27-year-old twin brother, Ralph Malayakini, 27-year-old Scott Moorman, 38-year-old Benjamin Kalama, 26-year-old Patrick Wosner, and 31-year-old Peter Hanchett. They departed in clear conditions at around 10 o'clock a.m. But just a few hours later, the winds changed and a storm blew in. As the weather worsened, Peter Hanchett's father went out looking for Sarah Joe. He couldn't find it though, so the Coast Guard joined the effort. After 5 days passed with no sign of the boat or its crew, the search was called off. Locals continued to look for the men for several weeks, but they eventually gave up hope. Then, in 1988, nearly 10 years after the Sarah Joe and her crew vanished, a biologist named John Naughton found the boat on a deserted atoll called Taongi in the Marshall Islands. Naughton had participated in the first search a decade earlier, and he just happened to be on a wildlife expedition 2,000 miles away when he spotted the weathered vessel. Nearby, Naughton and his colleagues discovered a jawbone protruding from a shallow grave marked by a pile of stones and a cross made of driftwood. Authorities identified the bones as Scott Moorman, and buried with him was a pad of paper with small, square pieces of tinfoil-like material between each set of pages. None of the other 4 men were ever found, and the purpose of the tinfoil-lined paper remains unclear to this day. It's also unclear whether Moorman was alive when he reached Taongi, or if he was found dead on the boat after it washed ashore. Shortly after Sarah Joe's discovery, Robert Malayakini traveled to Taongi to investigate. He concluded that the journey was too far to survive in a motorboat, but not knowing exactly what happened has left the missing men's families and community without much-needed closure. The Coast Guard returned the boat to Robert, and it's been sitting at the end of his driveway ever since, serving as a constant reminder of the missing 4 crew members. 3. The Curst Massacre. Located on the Prince of Wales Island at the edge of the Bering Sea, the sleepy fishing village of Craig, Alaska was home to just 600 people in 1983. Not a lot happened there outside the fishing industry, and its history was rather unremarkable. However, Craig was thrust onto the map in September of that year, when an unknown assailant boarded a 58-foot boat called the Investor and massacred its crew under the cover of darkness. The victims included the Investor's owner, 28-year-old Mark Colthurst, his pregnant wife Irene, their 2 children, and 4 deckhands. Several hours later, at around 6 o'clock a.m., the Investor was seen powering up and leaving the harbor. The man driving the boat waved at the skipper of a nearby vessel as the Investor retreated to a secluded bay, about a mile away. Nobody knew that the biggest mass murder in Alaska's history had occurred that morning, and nobody noticed that someone other than Colthurst was at the helm of the ship. The next morning, the Investor had returned to the harbor, where it was found engulfed in flames. In 1984, authorities charged John Kenneth Peel, a crewman from another boat, with 8 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. Peel maintained his innocence despite witness reports of him being seen near the Investor around the time of the killings. His first trial ended in a hung jury, and he was acquitted at his second trial. Since then, officials have stated that the case is closed, even though nobody was ever held accountable for the deaths. While the victims' relatives felt as though Peel got away with murder, others remain open-minded to the possibility that someone else was responsible for the massacre. 2. The SS Naric. Built in 1892 in Belfast, Ireland, the 470-foot SS Naric was a White Star Line cargo steamship that mainly operated as a livestock carrier. She vanished, though, in the Atlantic during her 7th voyage in February 1893. At the time, ships had no way to call for help if they ran into trouble on the open sea. The only way to get help was for another ship to pass by. But the ocean is a big place, so it didn't happen often. This wasn't the case for the Naric, however, and nobody even began to worry about the ship until her arrival in New York was long overdue. Delays were normal back then, but this was different. The wreck was never found, and the 74 people who were aboard when it sank were presumed dead. Shortly after the Naric disappeared, 2 of her lifeboats, both empty and disabled, were spotted 500 miles off Halifax, Nova Scotia. An inquiry failed to determine a likely cause for the sinking, even after inspecting her sister ship, the Bovik, which proved that the ship's design was stable. Shortly after the Naric vanished, 4 bottled messages claiming to be from crew members washed ashore in various places along the U.S. East Coast and in the United Kingdom. And the letters contained claims that the ship had struck an iceberg. Officials dismissed the notes as hoaxes, but they also never disproved the possibility of them being real. To this day, people remain divided on the matter, and unfortunately, the mystery of the Naric's fate may never be solved. 1. The disappearance of Richard Carr. In 2017, retired psychologist Richard Carr set out on his lifelong dream to sail around the world. The 71-year-old departed for the solo voyage from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, aboard his 36-foot vessel, the Celebration. All seemed to be going as planned for the first few weeks, but that didn't last long. Things took a devastating turn when Carr began messaging his wife and brother one day at 4:30 a.m., claiming that pirates were kidnapping him. One of the messages stated, "Being kidnapped by film company Deep South Black Cult took over steering." At the time, Carr was more than 1,300 miles from the nearest land, in a region of the Pacific that isn't known for having pirates. And unfortunately, the people he messaged were sleeping and wouldn't see his messages until later. 2 hours after sending the first message, Carr sent his wife and brother texts saying, "Apparently I've been spared," and letting them know that the pirates supposedly left. He also asked his wife to cancel the emergency distress signal he put out. Another hour after that, Carr sent another series of concerning messages, stating that he was shaken and scared. A large-scale Coast Guard search failed to turn up any sign of him or the Celebration, and questions linger surrounding his cryptic messages. Some have theorized that sleep deprivation and/or psychosis played a role in his sudden strange behavior. Carr's family had already noticed the effects of sleep deprivation early on his journey, when he stayed awake for so long that his speech was slurring. He was also hallucinating, and his thoughts were extremely scattered. In the 24 hours leading up to his disappearance, he repeatedly made statements that his family didn't understand and mentioned people they'd never heard of, including someone named Phyllis. Carr's responses to his family's heightened concerns became increasingly sparse. And to make matters worse, his boat had been having mechanical problems in recent weeks. Carr also seemed to be especially worried about the weather. His family grew increasingly worried when they noticed that he was beginning to drift off course. Meanwhile, his messages made less sense and became more ominous. The only thing that was explicitly clear was that Carr thought he was in serious danger. Who wrote about the bizarre tragedy in Outside magazine, described the communications as paranoid and seemingly schizophrenic. At some point following his last message, his location disappeared off the radar. To this day, no trace of Richard Carr or the Celebration has been found, including any debris to suggest that it might have been wrecked. His family has been left to make what little sense of his disappearance they can, based on their interpretations of his disturbing final communications. What do you think happened to Richard Carr? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.